This map over here is something that has been a long time coming in terms of being able to really simplify this. Number one, for myself. Whenever I'm doing these things, like for example the 7 keys, I'm doing this for myself before I'm doing it for anybody else. When I 4 levels of Energic, I did this for myself before I did it for anybody else. And this is something that I've like had in the works of saying things such as be, do, have, your identity, activity, and your property. The trinity of values, vision, mission, the alignment, assignment, attainment. The Lion King story, for example, like why that came together. And it's all now so very clear to me because my personal numerology number is the number 8. And if you look at what the 8 means, it means the manifester. What the 8 represents, it represents abundance. When you look at typing 888 hertz into YouTube, if you want to listen to that frequency, it's the abundance frequency. And having abundance is different to having riches. What do you define abundance as? That's a question for everybody. What's abundance to you?
Absolutely never being in lack, like something that's continuously flows to you. Constant movement, not stagnant.
That's interesting. You say the word flow there, and movement as well. Flow and movement. Those are some interesting words. Anybody else? How would you define abundance?
I think for me, it's like never being in need, not just financially, but like love or attention, everything else that we need as humans. Never being in need of it makes it abundant. You could just be content with what you have, and that's also abundant.
Yeah, I can't remember who was saying it. It was something like, it might have been James or somebody else, but it was that real wealth is not needing anything.
Yeah.
Having the lowest needs and highest wants ratio. That's real abundance.
But
yeah, anybody else? How do you define abundance?
Basically, just having everything you need plus surplus.
Overflow.
Overflow, yeah.
Yes.
Run over.
Yes, and it's like
eightfold. That's actually eightfold, isn't it?
I think I like overflow and abundance as synonyms more than anything because overflow is visual. So when I'm looking at abundance and I'm seeing overflow, I'm seeing a cup that's got water overflowing from it. But I also like overflow because of the word flow. And when I think about when a person is showing that they're in the abundance zone, it's like you have to be in a state of flow, the flow state, the high state that you can be in. So it's like you're in overflow mode, overflow state as well. So that's a good word to really use, I believe, for the abundance zone. And I was watching this podcast yesterday by the guy who is the podcast host for, he was actually interviewed, and he's never normally interviewed because he's normally the interviewer. And I was watching this podcast where he's the guy that does a podcast for the School of Greatness, Chris Lewishouse, and he was speaking about abundance the entire time and really talking about the difference between being rich and being somebody who's experiencing abundance. Because he had friends, for example, who had lots and lots of money. They had an overflow of money and excess of capital, but what they didn't have was the abundance. They didn't have the overflow of energy. And another way to break these 3 categories down is by what each of the personalities will value. So on the left, the person who is in alignment only is the one that is the dreamer. On the right, the person who is in the assignment only is the hustler. And in the bottom, over here, attainment, the person who is just in attainment is the investor. Now, what's the difference in the values? What do people find important? So if you're the hustler, what is it that you value? What are you most willing to give?
Action.
Yeah?
Time.
What was that, Yasmin?
Time.
Time. You're willing to give time because you value...
Put in the work.
Yeah, it's because you actually don't value your time. You value your money.
Mm.
And what about the investor? What do they value?
Money.
Precisely. So they'll give... sorry, no. They don't value money. They value time. But they'll give money.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense?
To save time, we'll just give the money out. Yeah.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So, energy... This person values energy. This person values money. This person values time. Right? So, when we're looking at the person who gets to experience the most returns of all of them, it's going to be the one that's in the middle. It's the abundance manifester who gets the best returns on all 3. That's where we truly want to be. But if I'm looking at right now, asking you all that question, because I think, Tasha, you said that you think that you're the dreamer right now. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Stephen, who do you think you are right now?
I feel like I'm the dreamer, but I feel like by default I'm the investor right now because but yeah, it's the dreamer, and I guess the hustler. I'd like to say I was the hustler, but I don't feel that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
with trying to keep this as PC as possible. When I was younger, around with the wrong kinds of people, I tried to be a hustler, and it didn't work. It didn't work very quickly when I was young, and even just friends, trying to sell things online with the eBay and stuff like that. It's some of my friends, they had the gift of the gab.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. I wasn't ever good at selling. Some people, they could sell a snowman snow. I don't know. I wasn't that. I found when I worked in marketing music, I didn't sell people something they didn't want. It was quite easy. Everyone I approached was like, yeah, like they already wanted the music. It was. Sorry, I'm just going off one, but yeah, I've not really ever felt like the hustler.
Okay.
The people that I know are hustlers. They're very sharp. They're very gifted at gab, as I say. They could. Yeah, I can't even think of a metaphor right now.
Well, what I would actually say is that right now, anybody who works like a 9 to 5 is in the category of the hustler. But
Okay.
they're only there when they're in their job. And it's almost as if people have a split personality because you have a job where you're a hustler, and then you have a side hustle or, business that is where you're a different person over there because, you can't exactly be in a 9 to 5 and be the person who is who you need to be when you're in your business. It's almost like a different person, a little bit difficult to truly have that, authenticity and integrity. So,
You know what? You're saying something that I've recently been kind of thinking. I just haven't really articulated it like that. But sorry, yeah, continue.
because I've been there, man. I've been there.
Because it feels like I keep asking myself this question. It's like, if I'm prepared to bust my ass for some guy who doesn't actually appreciate me, and I do that day in, day out, I listen to people who say, I hate this job, it's soul destroying. And I'm like, it's not soul destroying. I dance my whole way through it. Say, thank you, boss, leave and go back and wake up, make sure I'm up very early to make sure I get there. And I've been doing this for years of my life, decades. And I can do that. Why the hell wouldn't I apply myself super hardcore to just, become a 4A?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like it would actually probably take less work.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy how little work it takes to get to 4A, but how much.
It's paradoxical that I would do that every day of my life.
Yeah.
And then convince myself that this might be, you sure you want to do that?
Yeah. What actually gets in the way of a person doing it in their own business is it's usually themselves. It's like, it's not that the work is hard, it's just that they put up the barriers to say that everything else is more important. So what I would say is that every single one of you here, the reason for why you're in the leaders group is because you're not just investors. None of you. I believe that all of you have got not just the attainment of being in the business now, and this is another really important thing to appreciate and acknowledge for where you are currently, is that if you are in the business, you have won already. And this all links back to what I was saying about the fact that you're early, right? It's a fact. It's not an opinion. So you've already won in terms of the attainment. You've become the investor. And what's proof of that? Another way to prove that is that there's literally thousands of people, that have come through these ads that haven't been able to get to the stage where you're at right now because either they don't believe in themselves, either because they ain't got the financial means to get started out right now. It takes them time. Stephen, like, you understand that? Like, there were some people who months ago were ready to go in, And they did, but you couldn't. So you had to work. And now you won the game that you're in, right? So you got to congratulate yourselves for being investors. That's the attainment. You won. But the alignment is another piece that I see for all three of you right now on the call and any of the leaders, is that you're not just investors, but you're also becoming visionaries. And that you are visionaries to some degree. It's just that you don't see it yet, because the transformation happened over a period of time. It wasn't just something that happened overnight. I remember when, me and Yasmin were in the Waves of Impact event, sat next to each other doing the breath work, and we both had that experience of literally waking up and being like, yo, did you see some visions as well? I was like, yeah, I saw some visions. And that's what the gift of a visionary is, to see with their heart internally a clear picture as to what isn't actually there physically. So you've developed the gift of the visionary, which means that you must have been in alignment and attainment at the same time. And Rukia was telling me about this when we had a call earlier this week as well. I was talking about her vision and the visions that she's been getting in her dreams and things like that about, dominating in the United Arab Emirates and the Middle East and things like that, going into different institutions and impacting kids. Like, that's the visions of a visionary and the dreams of a visionary coming together. And so it's a level above that you have to give yourself recognition for, because you might be coming into this business and thinking to yourself, well, who's going to want to follow me? Who's going to want to be in my team? Who's going to want to partner up with me? Like, why am I valuable? Why would anybody want to listen to my content? And the reason why is because even if somebody came into the business invested, right, they are still going to look at you and think, damn, I wish I was more like Yasmin. Like, I wish I was more like Stephen. I wish I was more like Tasha. Because there's a gap. There's a recognizable gap between where they are and where you are in terms of the closeness to abundance, because that's what everybody really wants. That's what we are truly working towards. I remember when I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it talks about in there this idea of the cash flow quadrant, which is the money game. But the money game is incomplete, because the money game is not the game of life. The game of life, I believe, is about returning to, and this is why Naji is so beautiful, it's like returning to origin. And what's the origin? What's the source of where we've come from? Even if you look at, for example, the biblical stories. I've even got this on this presentation over here as well that I'm going to be sharing with leads as they come through too. But like when you start off and you look at Genesis, the beginnings of the Bible and the stories there, it's about the fall of man going from a state of consciousness to an elevated state of consciousness where they understood good and evil. And it's from that fall that they went from abundance, which is eating from every tree in the garden that you may freely eat from. That's not lack, that's abundance. And then moving towards scarcity as they were cast out from the garden and death was introduced, right? So there's the tree of good and evil, but there's also the tree of life and the tree of eternity that was talked about. So what's eternity? Eternity is infinity. And what's the infinity symbol? It's a sideways 8. It's a number 8. 8 is the key to infinity. 8 is the number for abundance. I believe that the game of life is about returning back to this place of true abundance and remembering who we really are. That's what it is. Like, I was looking at something earlier on today, and it was talking about how when Jesus Christ actually came onto the planet, everybody thought that he was blasphemous And the Jews were calling him to be blasphemous because he was saying that he was God. And they were like, no. You can't be that because you're just any other man. But all it was for Jesus was he elevated his consciousness to a point where he understood that he wasn't separate from the abundance. He was the abundance. He identified with that. And that's what this game is really about. It's about how can you transform your identity to go as close as possible to what is the truth. And the truth is that we are all abundance. We are all this image of God. That's who we are. But it's the scarcity and the lack that takes us out of this, and in the complete opposite, where we're not being ourselves and we're being most inauthentic, is when we are succumb to doubt and fear, and we become the strugglers, the worriers, the victims.